back in the day where you have to like literally write everything down. All right, slow down. Got it. Got it.
Yeah, I know. I have no idea how this is gonna work. Like, I wanted something a little bit better, but I mean, iPhones are iPhones, right?
iPhones are iPhones. I mean, some of the apps you can get now, like, you know, I mean, I've done a few podcasts in the shop lately, and the cats that come and do the podcast with me or whoever, they just use their iPhones now for the whole podcast. They edit it in their computer, and
Yeah.
sounds just fine for the most part.
I know this thing is it's like using iOS 1 because it's like jailbroken or something. But, all right, so I prepared questions ahead of time, but then instantly forgot all of them. So
You didn't write them down. Dear
no,
Lord.
no, that's a good start, isn't it? First of all, how long have you been running the lobby?
I have been running the lobby since I took it over from my friend August of 2005.
August 2005. Okay. And like a lot of video rental stores are going out of business now.
Yeah.
So why do you think this one's still going?
Well, to be honest, I mean, with the niche genre of films I deal with, if I would, if I would have like brought in like, at first when I opened up, the business was a bit slow, but I was like, oh, okay, I'll bring in some more mainstream stuff. I'm like, what's the point? I'm not competing with Blockbuster or, Movie Studio or Rogers, because that's the stuff that once Netflix and Redbox or whatever all came out, the big Hollywood stuff, why even bother? You can't compete with that, and it's a lost cause.
Yeah.
But dealing with the niche titles of like, so far I've been blessed where like you go to Netflix, you're not going to find Cannibal Holocaust on Netflix. Not yet. Knock on wood, of course.
Maybe.
But, being around almost 8 years now, being kind of part of the community, especially the store being on White Ave is probably the only place in Edmonton would work. If I was somewhere else, downtown, West End, North Side, I probably would have closed a long time ago. But having the university crowd and with the film festival, Dead Fest, that we do as well, it's a great crossover platform, right? And it's kind of like the film festival headquarters. People come here to pick up their tickets and stuff. I don't know. I guess I really can't totally explain it. For the most part, it's loyal customers over the years, and I do my best to bring in the out there titles that maybe they can't seem to find anywhere else in the city, I suppose.
Okay. And I've read reviews on the place, and I've been here myself, and a lot of people seem to like the fact that you don't do late fees at all.
I used to, and I used to. A lot of my friends at first, I'm like, and like a lot of my customers feel bad, like, no, here, take the money, and I'm like, I don't know. I've always been a better socializer than a businessman. So I'm a movie fan first, businessman second. So I just want to make sure when people come in, they feel like, they're my friend right off the bat. Because it's not like I have employees, right? It's just me and me only. So I don't know, I just don't want to scare people off, I guess, because there is so much competition, and like, wow, like I can just download it or whatever, or just whatever. But I mean, there are times like, dude, your movie was like a month late, But I mean, I live in this community where like, customers like, ah, dude, I'm so sorry about it being late. Here, I bought you a bottle of Jägermeister, and I'm like, God, I love you. You see, that's better. Or, hey, Kev, I got you a new like McFarlane figure for your store, and I'm like, see, that's kind of like the personal relationship I guess I have with a lot of my clientele, right? Instead of being the whole. I mean, my girlfriend who has like the real job, she's a breadwinner. She's all about money and like, you should be doing this, this, and this. I'm like, babe, I don't know. It's not who I am. I'm not going to change that way. So, yeah, I mean, if your movies are a couple of days late, what bums me out more is, people return their movies late, and not only late, but they didn't get a chance to watch them all. And I'm the guy, like, just keep it for another week, dude. Like, or do that.
Yeah.
I want you to see the movie, obviously. I'm more disheartened when they don't. So, I guess I'm pretty laid back that way. Kind of like a movie nerd hippie mentality, I suppose. Yeah.
Makes for a good business model so far.
Maybe not financially, but hopefully, people remember the place and they come back. And it's always like with the film festival, we bring a lot of people from out of town in, from LA and Toronto and wherever. And every time a guest of ours has a chance to pop in my store, it's really nice to hear like what they think about it too. Like, I think one of our first guests was Tim Sullivan. He directed one of the segments of the movie Chillerama, and he did 2001 Maniacs 1 and 2, and did a lot of cool flicks back in the day, but when he gave me a story, he was just going to pop in for 5 minutes, and then my partner's going to take him for dinner. But instead, he's like, "Oh my God, I'm home!" And he literally sat on the couch that we're sitting at and just bullshitted horror movies for like 5 hours. And he was rambling through all my stuff and looking for movies he had made back in the 80s. Like, "Oh my God, I can't believe you have this movie. Nobody has this movie, you know." And as customers were coming in, ironically, to buy tickets for the show that night, like, "Kev, is that Tim Sullivan sitting on your couch?" I'm like, "Yeah." And he's like, "Yeah, come sit down. Let me tell you stories of working in the indie horror movie system in the 80s, you know." So yeah, it's kind of cool they come in. Same with the Astron 6 guys that made Manborg and Father's Day. When we screened Father's Day last June, you know, after the movie, I'm like, "What do you guys want to do? Do you guys want to go to a bar or something? Whatever." You know, like, "Actually, let's just buy a case of beer, go back to your store, and bullshit movies." And that's what we did all night. So it's always good. It's nice that people, you know, enjoy the ambiance of my store.
Horror seems to have that effect on people.
Yeah, it does. I mean, there'll always be the people that like, "Oh my God, it's the creepy store below the daycare center," or whatever, you know. But
Great
you're
placement,
not,
buddy.
you're not gonna be able to please everybody, of course. I mean, it's either you get it or you don't. I think that's the beauty of being a horror movie fan or a genre fan in general. It's no different than being like, you know, a Trekkie or a Wars guy or, you know, a like indie music lover. Either you're in the scene or you're not, right? And that's, as far as loyalty from the customers, you know, it goes same with music. I mean, with music and all the digital formats there are, the vinyl stores still do fairly well because the collectors go in there. They still want to own it on the LP. And I think that kind of passion can translate well into genre film lovers too. I mean, because yeah, you know, it used to just be rental shop, but no, now I do a lot of special orders for people you can buy off the shelf. And, you know, cats still want to own it in that case and have it on their shelf, you know, to build their library of awesomeness, yeah. So I'm sure, you know, when they have kids or grandkids and they have no idea what the hell a video rental store was, they can, you know, or even what movie cases are like, because I don't even know how much longer those are going to be around, you know, they'll have the evidence to prove that, yes, there was a time when we used to leave our house to go, you know, grab these music items or movie items. And, you know, it's funny because with all, like, even the CD stores closing, and eventually all the video stores will be closed too. And yeah, convenience, everything will be a click away or whatever on your computer, or, you know, all Matrix style. But I don't know. I mean, I'm just getting older and getting all like nostalgic about it. But you know, there's something about taking that journey, going to the store and just kind of combing through the shelves and maybe talking with whoever works at the store, whether it be me or somebody else, and, you know, having that human contact and that banter about films.
Yeah. And I mean, I guess I did some research. And a lot of people seem to like that you're really good at suggesting things that get.
It's what I try to do. I want to make people that, like, if they're not that familiar with the genre, but they kind of want to get into it. And, you know, it's weird for me because as I get older, it's always cool when I get teenagers coming to my store because, like, I see myself in them, like, you know, 20 years ago. And I got to remember, oh, right, they weren't born when these movies that I think everybody's already seen came out. So maybe I can, like, you've never seen The Thing? Oh, my God. I mean, that's cool in a weird way. I'm kind of excited for them, you know, like, because I wish I could get that first viewing experience back. But yeah, I mean, you know, when you know, if they're like, it's really cool when dudes are really like, they trust me and like, Kev, just recommend me like 3 or 4 movies. And I kind of just try to get a vibe of, well, what do you like? You know, what's the last good one you saw? And then I'll try to give them a broad spectrum of 3 or 4 titles. And then when they return, I'm like, you know what? I really dug this one. This one not so much, and this one was okay. At least I know where to go from there then, because everybody's different, right? I mean, it's amazing. One person's favorite movie of the year could be the other person's most hated movie of the year. But that's the beauty of opinions and being a film fan. No one's right, but everybody has an opinion, you know?
Do you think that, like, as you watch more horror, you get a little bit more desensitized to it?
Oh, absolutely.
You can't really have the same reactions?
You could probably imagine having a business like this. The number one question I always get asked is, you know, what's the scariest horror movie you've ever seen? And that's a matter of opinion. It's an impossible question to truly answer. Everybody's different.
And there's different types of scares.
Exactly. If you have a phobia with clowns, and you're terrified of clowns, well, obviously clowns are going to freak you out. Or bugs, or darkness, or, you know, a dude wearing a hockey mask coming to chase you, or ghosts. I mean, I always, the best I hope for as a fan is to be entertained, or a movie that just kind of like resonates with you, so like 3-4 days later it stays with you. There's nothing worse than like watching a movie and I find the next day you've already forgotten about it. Like where a buddy's like, "What'd you do last night?" Oh, I watched a movie. Well, what'd you watch? And it literally takes a few seconds to remember. You're like, because it didn't leave an impression. I mean, if you're a filmmaker, I don't know. I'd rather make the worst movie of all time or the best movie of all time rather than just a forgotten about 2 hour time killer, because nobody will remember that. Yeah. But yeah, you can't help but get desensitized, And obviously, the world we live in, remakes, rehashes, reimaginings, reboots, whatever you want to call them. Every movie I grew up with, I'm basically an 80s baby, right? I mean, I discovered video stores before Blockbuster and Rogers came into effect. So we're talking 1983, 84, 85, when it was just independent mom and pop shops like myself. And you'd go in and, the creepy, overbloated VHS porno style cases, and you'd see the covers, and your imagination runs wild, and you'd rent stuff just off the covers, and I'd eat it all up. And, yeah, and it's, I don't know, I find it kind of ironic getting back to the video stores surviving. At the beginning, there was the mom and pop stores. Then the Blockbusters and the Rogers came in, and they kind of destroyed the mom and pop stores. And then they eventually collapsed, and now all that's left, for the most part, is independent film places, right? I mean, I got the Lobby here. You got Videodrome's doing quite well. They used to be alternative video, and they're hanging in there. And the movie studio, I mean, I know they're a bit bigger because they got a few locations, but they're not like Blockbuster big. So it's just funny that the last ones left are the guys just kind of maybe clinging on to the past,
It's kind of unfortunate because designing movie covers is almost an art in itself.
Dude, totally is an art form. I mean, if you have a mediocre movie, just make an amazing cover. That'll help sell it right out of the get-go, It's the same kind of art form that designing a good movie trailer is too, right?
Yeah.
To this day, I don't know why there isn't an Oscar category for best trailer.
Like Splice.
Yeah. I mean, the trailer sells the movie, so, actually, I got an issue with it, but that's a totally different subject, because I find the trailers give away the entire movie. To the point where, people are so used to that now, the younger generation, where if a trailer comes out that's just a teaser, doesn't really show you that much, they're upset. They're like, well, I don't even know what this is about. I want to see more. I'm like, no, but that's the point of it. It should be the point of a trailer.
That's why I skip them all the time.
It should intrigue you, show you something, but in the end show you nothing at all. And I love going into a movie blind. And it's tougher these days because of the access we have. I mean, to go into a movie spoiler-free is virtually impossible. I mean, I love the access. And for me, owning the store and doing my research to bring in new movies, it's great, obviously. But there is that small part of me growing up as a kid. I mean, in the 80s, what do we have to know what's coming out? Fangora magazines or, Famous Monsters in Movieland. And then maybe you see a trailer on a VHS tape or in a movie theater. And then that was it. There was no spoilers going on, Stuff didn't leak out online. Or, hey, we're going to show you the first 5 minutes of the movie. Why? Why would you do that? I don't want to see the first 5 minutes. I'm not even a fan of, what was it last year when, I think Dark Knight Returns opened. Or, no, maybe it was a Hobbit. And we're going to show you the first 8 minutes of the new Star Trek movie. Well, what's the point? I'd rather not see it. And they did it with, they actually did it with the Dark Knight Returns, the Christmas before, where they showed you the first scene, with Bane and the plane and everything. And it's like, see the rest next summer. I'm like, I didn't need to see any of it now.
That explains why they shot it that way. It seemed kind of like a really weird segue. It was like, there's this really high, energy, bombastic opening. I was like, why is this here?
Well, they did the same thing, actually, that same kind of promo idea with The Dark Knight, when they actually showed the Joker bank robber scene in '08. Like the Christmas before. I can't remember what movie what it was shown in front of, but they did. And it's, what, I understand what the theaters are doing, right? Because ticket sales are going down. Yeah. Hysterically, the theater chain owners, they actually think it's too many rated R movies coming out, not enough family-friendly movies coming out, which is the biggest bullshit line I've ever heard. I mean, it had nothing to do with the increased prices or the garbage. Everything's in 3D, so we're going to tag on extra $3. And more importantly, it doesn't do with the quality of studio movies coming out. Give me something new. Give me something original. I mean, don't get me wrong, I'm a sucker for blockbuster movies. I mean, there's a lot of good ones coming out this summer. But in the end, for the most part, if you look at the lineup, sequel, based on a book, remake, reboot, reimagining. I mean, originality is,
sort of at a premium right now.
Absolutely. I think that's why I cling on to a lot of my old school flicks here in the store, man. I mean, to me, I love the indie flicks of the 70s and 80s, and even the 90s, there was, because, they didn't have the money, but they also didn't have the studios breathing down their necks, so the filmmakers had freedom to do some bizarre, crazy stuff. Anyways, we're totally off topic here.
Oh, well, I mean, that's sort of the thing, right?
Oh, fair enough.
Yeah, how long have you been watching horror?
I watched my first horror movie, I think, in 1981. So, yeah, over 30 years. It was a movie called Ghost Story. But the first horror movie that really blew me away and totally freaked me out, even though it's kind of hilarious by today's standards, was Creepshow. Stephen King, George Romero's Creepshow from 1982. Growing up as a kid, my parents didn't let me watch horror movies. But, you know, every kid had that one cool kid on the block whose parents didn't care. You know, that kid that could call his parents by their first name. And you're like, whoa, that's kind of weird. So I'd sneak over to his house and we watched, like, all the Friday the 13th and all that jazz. But I was terrified of those movies, so I couldn't tell my dad that I was scared to go in the basement, military family. Because we kind of was watching horror movies, I thought he'd kill me. So, you know, go downstairs and grab this. I'm like, no, I can't do it. Jason's under the stairs. He's going to get me. But I couldn't tell him that. So it was weird. I kind of conquered my fears of horror movies, like, I don't know, grade 4 or 5, because that's when I was introduced to how they did it. And I got into the effects artists behind the scenes. Tom Savini, Rob Bottin, and started buying Fangoria magazines, so you start, you know, learning more about the directors and stuff. So once you become fascinated with, like, well, how do they do that? Then as far as being scared as a kid, I guess, kind of goes away. That's when I really kind of dove into it and became, you know, that horror movie nerdy outcast in elementary and junior high.
I've still got one movie I kind of keep sacred as something that still scares me. It's they call it Dead Alive here, and I think it's called
Brain Dead.
Brain Dead.
Yeah, Peter Jackson. It's pretty funny. It definitely holds the record still for like one of the goriest movies ever made. Obviously, watching it now, more grown up, you can see the humor.
Oh yeah, it's funny.
That movie, yeah, it's a good combination of horror and humor. One of my favorite horror movies as a kid that did the kind of same thing, mixing the horror and humor. That if I ever had a kid and want to get my kid into horror movies at like the age of 10 or 11, I'd probably make him watch Return of the Living Dead from 1984. You know, it was a punk rock zombie flick that when I was a kid I was terrified, but there was enough levity in the movie that, you know, every time I was getting too freaked out, there'd be like a funny joke or a funny sight gag. Yeah. So I'm like, plus that's when I fell in love with a punk rock girl. If you've never seen the movie, it's probably the greatest graveyard strip scene of all time. Possibly the only graveyard strip scene, but either way, it was fantastic. God bless Linnea Quigley, one of the true scream queens of the '80s.
Yeah, they do a lot of really good horror movies. Sort of manage to mix levity in because you can't be all up all the time.
Reanimator is another great one from the '80s that managed to mix, and you know, and some didn't know exactly how to balance the horror and humor, but if you can do it, and it's not easy. Horror comedies, that's got to be a tough thing to do.
Timing and context. So
absolutely, but if you do it right, it works. I mean,
so do you still have that one movie? Do you still have like any movies that really still get to you?
It's tough to say. I mean, you know, if I think about my younger self watching this movie, there's something bizarre, but the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre, there's just something uncomfortable about it and primal. And it's kind of funny because with the younger generation that had never seen it, and when you say Texas Chainsaw Massacre to them, they think of the 2003 Jessica Biel movie, right? Which was an okay remake, although we won't go into Platinum Dunes and their remakes because I'll probably get way too angry as this discussion keeps going. Thank God they stopped. But, you know, and maybe because the younger generation, they'll watch the original one now. And they're like, oh, yeah, this is kind of boring and slow, and there's really no gore in this movie at all. And that's true. There is no blood in the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. It's the biggest misconception of all time. There's maybe like 3 drops of blood when Franklin is killed in the wheelchair in the dark and his flashlight goes down. And maybe a little bit of smattering around the dinner table scene, but there is, it's all your imagination. And because, I don't know when the last thing we saw the original movie was, because it's so grainy and nasty looking, it almost felt like real, like you could almost smell it coming off the screen, especially during the dinner scene. And if you've seen the making of the movie and they spent 36 hours in that room and the meat was rotting pretty bad, and by the end of the movie, everybody hated Tobe Hooper. I mean, it was definitely an indie, independent movie at its finest. But I don't know, there's just something really uncomfortably viral about it. Plus, it was one of the first movies to do the whole based off a true story, which, of course, is
But there was like
2% real, but not really.
There was a house somewhere.
No, actually, with this one, I mean, it's more or less should be well known that Texas Chainsaw Massacre, Norman Bates from Psycho, and Buffalo Bill from Silence of the Lambs are all based off the same guy, and that's Ed Gein from Wisconsin. And this took place in the 1950s. Yes, there was a guy who made lampshades out of human skin. He was a grave robber. He made, he had ashtrays out of skulls, and he did make himself a human bodysuit, right? But he actually only killed 2 women. The rest was just grave robbing, and he had mother issues, hence the Norman Bates complex going on. But it wasn't Texas; it was Wisconsin, and I don't know. Sometimes I gotta feel like when I get again the younger generation coming in, I feel like I have to be like a pop culture of useless trivia, like professor to them and correct them, like. I don't know. I hope younger kids aren't so naive about if they see based on a true story in the credits, please don't believe it. Like, don't believe it at all. Like, all you need to be based on a true story is like 0.5% of the story is real. Like you said, yeah, there was a house. Like the haunting in Connecticut more recently. I'm like, yeah, it wasn't a bad movie. But then you go do your research, you're like, really, dude? Like, not even like 10% of this you kept in the real story? So, and of course, as far as, remembering that I'm getting older, so, I get customers coming in, hey, Kev, you got The Hills Have Eyes? I'm like, well, the original or the remake? Like, well, there's a remake? I'm like, oh. So I'm like, you know what? I'll give you a 2 for 1. Just grab the original and grab the remake, but watch them both, for sure.
Do you want to take
I just want to take time. Yeah. This is fun, man. How's it going, man?
It's really easy, but it's horror, so I guess it's pretty easy to mess up.
I suppose.
Actually, that's a question on here. How do you think you screw up horror?
By people who don't actually love horror movies making horror movies. I think they're thinking more about capitalizing on a brand than they are about coming up with something twisted and original or just fun. The problem is, like, in the 70s and probably mainly the 70s, the death of kind of like being creative and taking chances in cinema and the horror genre, the minute they started releasing how much money a movie made opening weekend. And that's where it became more about, all right, it's about marketing, it's about advertising, it's hitting our proper demographic, and it's about making, our budget back and make as much money as we can. It's almost like the last thing producers and studio heads are concerned about is making a quality movie. Every now and then you'll luck out and they'll have some good people involved that truly love the genre, but to me, I can't help but be cynical, and again, it's because I'm getting older, that, instead of hiring, like, up-and-coming, like, dudes that bleed and love the genre, because the horror movie genre never gets much respect, even though it's been around for 100 years. It's the one consistent genre. I mean, one of the first films, quote-unquote, that was ever made, Thomas Edison made the first version of Frankenstein in 1910, and it bombed. It was only 10 minutes long, but, it was cool. Great documentary to check out, actually. It focuses only on American horror movies, but Nightmares in Red, White, and Blue, narrated by Lance Henriksen. It's a good one. Kind of takes you through the history. I love recommending documentaries like that to the younger generation because it kind of gives them a first-rate education on the history. And then hopefully they'll come back and be like, oh, dude, I saw they talked about this movie and that movie. I now want to watch those movies, which is really cool.
Yeah.
But I get fed up with like we were just talking about remakes before we started again, and like the fact that like the god awful Nightmare on Elm Street remake that came out. I mean, they're not hiring directors that love the genre. They're hiring, oh, this guy made some sweet music videos. Let's get him behind the camera.
They did that with Saw too, didn't they?
No, Saw actually, for like, yeah, you could say Saw was like the 14th of the 2000 the O's decade because they kept pumping one out every year. Although, people like to lambast on Saw pretty good. I actually got to give Saw credit. I wasn't into it for the gore or the torture or all that. I always think, where are the writers going to go with this? Because they had to keep that story arc going, Yeah. And they always hired new writers generally for each movie. So I'm like, geez, I feel bad for the writers of Part 6. Because with what's happened already, they got to go back and more flashbacks and how do we connect it all together? And yeah, some of the parts just were not that good. But in the end, I mean, I thought they did a pretty decent job with having a 7-part story arc going on.
Story arc.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, 4 and 5 were pretty bad, but then 6 was really good because 6 kind of took the piss out of the American healthcare system. That's the good thing about horror movies too, right? You can take a something that's happening in the world politically or socially, and kind of cover it up with a horror movie plot line. But you're still kind of trying to get your message out there. You know, that's what George Romero was great at with his old school zombie flicks. You know, Night of the Living Dead came out right at the peak of the civil rights movement. Dawn of the Dead was all about consumerism. You know, the shopping mall. And even like Land of the Dead, which wasn't, you know, Romero's best movie by any means, you know, that was very post 9/11, where like fear and the you know, was the driving drug. In fact, if you look at all Romero zombie flicks, you could replace the zombies with any type of natural disaster. Because in the end, all those movies, it's never the zombies that are the real villains in the movie. It's humans turning on humans in those movies that causes everything to go to shit, right?
Yeah, like sort of like what they're trying to do with The Walking Dead.
Yeah, I mean, The Walking Dead's got a great blueprint with the comic book series, you know.
Yeah.
But I mean, you know, the thing is though, I'll always love zombies, but you know, now it's just like everybody loves zombies are everywhere, you know, and that's cool and all. And you know, look what's happening on TV. They're trying to capitalize on all like the old school franchise of turning into TV shows. Bates Motel. Like I love Alfred Hitchcock. Psycho's still one of my favorite movies of all time. And I'm not really big on Bates Motel. You know, even Hannibal. They made it. You know, NBC has the TV show Hannibal now. And they just announced this week that MTV is going to be producing a TV show based off Scream.
So do you think it would be difficult to produce a television show based off a horror series?
It depends what the horror series, the horror movie franchise you're going with, right? I mean,
Freddy would be interesting.
Well, yeah, and as a kid in the 80s, there was a show called Freddy's Nightmares, and we all got excited, thinking, oh my god, there's going to be a weekly Freddy Krueger show. But in the end, it was kind of like a Tales from the Crypt thing, where Freddy would just introduce the episode, and it'd be something totally different. It wasn't nearly as big of a kick in the balls as when they announced Friday the 13th, the TV show, in the late 80s. We're like, oh, as a kid, you're like, Jason's going to be on the screen every week? No, it had nothing to do with Jason. It just had the same producers involved, and it was about an antique shop, and you know, this brother and sister inherited it from their recently deceased father, I think. I can't totally remember. And they sold all the antiques that were in there, and then their uncle shows up. It's like, oh, where are all the antiques? Like, well, we sold them all. We can't sell them all. They're all cursed. So each episode was about them trying to get the antiques back, and it focused on one of these antiques and the evils that they can do in the hands of wrong people. It was an interesting idea. They just shouldn't have called it Friday the 13th. That was...
Sort of a brand thing.
Yeah, absolutely. But again, it's all about marketing, right? Smart. Very smart.
Why do you think that horror doesn't get much respect?
It depends. Horror, it's weird. Like, the biggest kind of, like for horror movie fans, I remember the Oscars actually, 1990, where Best Picture went to Silence of the Lambs. Best Actor went to Anthony Hopkins. Best Actress went to Jodie Foster. Oh, no, it didn't go to Jodie Foster. It went to, well, maybe it did. I know Kathy Bates won as well from Misery that year. The problem is we were all jacked, but of course they're like, well, you know, Silence of the Lambs isn't a horror movie. It's a psychological thriller. I'm like, wait a minute, it's about a dude who eats people. It's about another dude that wants to make a suit of human skin. What is not horrific about that? But of course, the minute these movies start doing well, get praised, they kind of twist it. It's not a horror movie because that's like a black mark on your flick, right? You're like, psychological thriller. You know, Misery, psychological thriller.
What do you think the difference is?
I don't think there is one. I think it's just in the wording. You know, I think at that time, horror movies were like very shunned. Late 80s, early 90s was a bad time to be a horror movie fan. The Motion Picture Association was censoring everything. You'd be amazed that probably the darkest age for horror movie fans in my generation, I'd say, 1990 to 1995. There was nothing coming out. I mean, there were a few gems, like the original Candyman had come out in theaters. You know, they managed to release Jason Goes to Hell, but that wasn't really a good movie. Horror movies are basically dead, unpopular, uncool until Wes Craven brought Scream out in '96, and that kind of reboosted everything. And Scream was a great movie, but sadly, if you have one great movie, you're going to see 20 clones of that great movie come out, which are quite inferior. So every studio was like, well, let's take the formula of Scream. We'll get all these good-looking young actors from, you know, the WB or whatever, Dawson's Creek, and we'll throw them into a Guess Who the Killer is Scooby-Doo kind of episode where at the end, oh my God, it's my best friend, or how I didn't, like Urban Legend, where like, you're watching the unknown killer like brutally kill these people, and then at the end you find out it's 90-pound Rebecca Gayheart, and I'm like, I don't care how crazy she is, she's 90 pounds. I saw her lift a dude, you know, like earlier in the movie when she was, you know, wearing the disguise. So, And then even like that was kind of like the death of great artwork on the covers too, because you look at some of the boxes from the '80s where it's like beautifully hand drawn or just creepy twisted shit. In the '90s, it was all like floaty head syndrome, where you have the sexy actors like in their heads just kind of floating around, and that's it. Like I remember when H2O came out, Halloween, you know, which like, oh, Jamie Lee Curtis is back, this is gonna be great, and you know, Michael Myers, and it's going to reboost the genre because Kevin Williamson was writing the script, of course, wrote Scream. You know, that wasn't a bad movie, but I remember the case. It was just like, oh, all these floaty heads on there. And then that stupid Creed song was stuck in my head because that was like the big push for it. And, you know, but again, it's a product of its time. You know, I'm sure people that loved horror movies in the 50s and 60s were bitching about the horror movies that were coming out in the 70s and 80s too. Going, it's not like it used to be. And I got to put myself back and trying to sound like that cynical old man, you know, where I'm like, kids and their damn movies today. It's not like it used to be. But I don't think I'm totally wrong because I do get, you know, those cool, like, 16, 17-year-olds that come in here and they know way more about horror movies than I ever did at that age. And they know stuff about, like 70s movies and 60s movies, which I think is awesome. So I have not given up. Like, I'm like, oh, there's hope. You know, there is hope. They love those movies. Because nothing saddens me more when I recommend, like, an old Argento flick, a Romero movie, and, you know, they return it like, nah, it's kind of slow and dull. And I'm like, because that was the other problem now. We live in a world where it's ADD. You know, people want it now. They want bang, 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 like music video style for 2 hours. You know, it's becoming rarer and rarer to have a good horror movie come out where the tension is being built up. You know, they still exist, just not so much in the Hollywood system, right? I mean, the last 5 years, 6 years, I think the French are doing it better than anybody else, to be honest. Martyrs is one of my favorite horror movies to come out in the last decade, easily. It was shot in Montreal, but it's by a company from France that did it. You know, Inside, another great movie. Frontiers, another great movie. You know, the Spanish doing it great too. I mean, when Rec came out last year with Sleep Tight, yeah, I mean, there's a lot of good stuff still coming out. It's just you got to dig a little bit deeper to find it, I suppose.
I guess there are a lot more people making a lot more different movies too.
Yeah, well, and that has a lot to do with technology, right? I mean, it was pretty hard to make an independent flick 30, 40 years ago when, you know, not every cat can afford a 16mm camera, great lighting, and it's the film stock. Now with, like, digital, you know, anybody can basically be a filmmaker with the right, you know, programs and editing, you know, systems. I mean, it's mind-blowing. But you can have all the tools and bells and whistles you want. If you don't have an original idea, it's going to look shiny and pretty, but it's going to be hollow as hell.
Makes sense.
Yeah, kind of like a Michael Bay movie. Don't get me wrong, I enjoy the occasional Michael Bay movie, but you're not, you know.
That caps so many sentences.
Yeah, I know.
Michael Bay.
I
sometimes wonder how he feels.
You know what? That's a cat that, like, we can, like, kind of make jokes on Michael Bay, but in the end, who wouldn't want to be Michael Bay? Dude's rich. He's doing what he wants to do. You know, I mean, he's living the life. You know, it's don't get me wrong. A lot of cats just jealous of Michael Bay, and like I want to be Michael Bay too. But if we're just talking about movies and art, yeah, the dude, you know, he makes commercials, very shiny, pretty music video style commercials. Yeah, although I heard the new one, Pain and Gain, is pretty fun with Wahlberg and The Rock. So
which one?
Pain and Gain. Hey, lady, how you doing?
Not too bad. How are you?
Not too bad. 5-minute break.
Yep.
Found it.
Yeah.
Oh, guys know each other.
Yeah.
And now, before the next show starts, let's enjoy an intermission.
Let's all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby to get ourselves a treat.
Alright, so where were we? I was going to ask you, do you have any suggestions for people who want to get into the genre? Where do you think they should start? I know there's a lot of different genres.
Yeah, that's kind of it. Yeah, it's almost like, you know, just jump into the ocean, right? I don't know, like I wouldn't say like, hey, you know, you don't have to. I mean, it's cool if you want to start from like, you know, the early 20s and go work your way up to now, but I don't know. Well, don't start with remakes. Okay, start with originals first, please. There are exceptions to the rule, though. Like, probably, you know, the two examples that always come up, like, how do you make a good remake? And, you know, and
question on here.
oh, well, easy. I mean, you make it your own, and it hands down two of the best remakes. I'll say three of the best remakes. One is John Carpenter's The Thing. Great remake. You know, it's respectful, the original movie from the 50s, but it's totally a different cat on its own, obviously. David Cronenberg's The Fly. Nothing to do with the Vincent Price The Fly, you know, which is a fun kind of campy movie in its own right. I love Vincent Price, but when Cronenberg released his version of The Fly, you know, I remember hearing the stories that people thought it was going to be this cheesy kind of just updated version of the Vincent Price movie, and actually on the premiere night, apparently, in like 1986, they literally were giving out like little fly, like, things to wear in your head or whatever, because it's going to be fun and stuff, and if you've seen The Fly, you're like, that movie is all types of not fun, and there's some, when Jeff Goldblum's transforming, it's pretty nasty and uncomfortable. Good effects by Chris Wallace. Do you
have that movie?
The Fly?
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, Gina Davis and Goldblum. That's when they got. I think they.
I love Goldblum.
That's when they got married. They're working together on that movie. And then the third one, another great one, and we were just talking on the TV here, was the 1978 version of Invasion of the Body Snatchers with Donald Sutherland, Jeff Goldblum again, and Leonard Nimoy himself, Mr. Spock. That's a cool remake, and like Body Snatchers, that storyline has been remade like 6-7 times, right? There's the Abel Ferrara '93 version, that one with Nicole Kidman and Craig that came out like 5 years ago, just simply called Invasion, which was terrible.
I didn't even hear about it.
Yeah, exactly. That's how bad it was. In and Out, my friend. In and Out. But yeah, I mean, those are good remakes. I mean, like, again, this is just my opinion. So, you know, I'm not right by any means. There's always going to be people that disagree with me. But, you know, I don't know if we talked about the Evil Dead remake that came out last month.
Yeah, when it came
in.
in.
Everybody was so big on it. I'm talking about, like, the horror movie critics, like, a month before we saw it when it premiered at South by Southwest. There were even a couple cats putting it up on the pedigree of, this is like right next to Cronenberg's The Fly and Carpenter's The Thing. So I had insane expectations going into this movie. On one hand, I enjoyed it. I did. I know every time I talked about it, it sounds like I didn't enjoy it, but I did. But then, it's not something that's going to resonate with me 5 years from now when I look back on it. You know, I'll still prefer the original Raimi Evil Dead and Evil Dead 2 and Army of Darkness. Maybe it's because I just grew up with those movies. Time will tell, I suppose, you know. But it had great gore. But after that, it really didn't have anything to capture my imagination. And then, you know, when they're saying, well, you know, Kev, you can't judge it as a remake. You got to look at it like its own movie. I'm like, okay, I can do that. But if you watch the movie, they keep obviously throwing these wink, wink, nudge, nudge scenes from the original couple flicks, just with today's jacked up special effects. So your brain is telling you, oh, I'm reminded of the old movies again. So you're like, you know, the chick's hand gets possessed and she cuts it off. And you're thinking, oh, the hand didn't come back to life after? Oh, bummer. You know, and the characters just didn't resonate, weren't really likable. And I'm not going to play the I miss Bruce Campbell in the movie card because, you know, they were smart. They did a great job by not getting a new kid actor to play Ash. That would have been way too distracting, and who would want to be that kid? Hey, you get to play Bruce Campbell's role. No, thank you. I don't want to be criticized by the horror movie community that bad. I'm happy that we made a killing because that's good for rated R horror movies. It's good to show that rated R movies can still succeed in a wide release, and hopefully it'll spawn more. More original rated R movies would be nice, but whatever, you know, it's good for rated R horror movies. And then, yeah, getting back to the whole, you know, paying tribute to this scene and that scene, I'm like, man, when your number one attribute to this movie is great gore, where's my tribute to bodily dismemberment? You know, the one scene that would have been brilliant, like, you know, where, you know, they chop the body up into 5 pieces and the head's still cackling at the, like, you know, we'll swallow your soul or whatever. The Deadites just weren't crazy enough for my liking. I mean, except for the main chick, Mia, who, you know, she was charismatic and good. The other ones felt more like, you know, infected virus zombies from 28 Days Later.
Really did seem like
Yeah, they just didn't have any personality to them.
It's been a wander around.
But again, these are, and like the whole rehab storyline, was that really necessary? Call me old school, call me old fashioned. I have no issue with, hey, let's just go to a cabin and have a good time this weekend. And I understand their whole idea with the rehab storyline was that was a way to keep them at the cabin so they wouldn't take off right away. But in the end, once the bridge got washed out anyways, they're not going anywhere, so it was totally unnecessary. And the opening scene with the dad burning his daughter alive to give us some sort of backstory on it, unnecessary. Didn't need that. Didn't need to be in that movie at all.
Yeah, it probably would have been better when they were looking into the basement.
Yeah.
If we didn't know what
We
had
didn't know.
happened.
Yeah, we don't. Yeah, exactly. We didn't know. And you know, I mean, in the original, and I can't even spend this much time talking about Evil Dead, but in the original, you know, like when they find the book, they find the old tape recording with the professor's voice on it. They hit play, you hear the professor's voice, and it's a total accident that the evil is unleashed because you know he's saying the words. In this one, there's so many red flags not to open the book, not to read the book. Oh, it's barbed wire, black garbage bag. It literally says in red ink, don't read this, you'll all fucking die. You know, I mean, how many more red flags do you need not to read it? Yeah, I think I'm going to read this book. What could happen? You know, so. Anyways, I just don't get how, again, I didn't hate it. I know it sounds like I hated it right there. I'm glad it did well. It was a fun time at the movies, but a couple days later, it just didn't stick with me. And again, maybe I'm a minority, right? Because I talked to a lot of my buddies that they went twice to see it. You know, they want to take their buddies to go see it. You know, and that's cool, I guess. You know, so I should maybe just appreciate the fact that people are excited about horror movies, remake or not. Myself, I'd compare the Evil Dead remake basically to the Hills Have Eyes remake. Beautifully shot, great gore, but in the end, I kind of felt like I'd been there, done this before already. But just like the Hills Have Eyes remake, when that came out, I went with a buddy that had never seen the original Hills Have Eyes, and he absolutely loved the remake. He's like, that movie was brilliant. I thought it was good, but because the plot line was so similar to the original one from the 70s, I was kind of like, I feel like I've been here and done this before. It just looks more glossy. But anyways, we're way off topic. Sorry about that.
Oh, yeah, no. Well, you know, it's all good.
Yeah.
What about, for remakes, what about sequels?
I have a soft spot for sequels. Only if the sequel, though, continues the story arc of the first movie with hopefully some of the same characters. I hate sequels where really it's just in name only, you know, like House and then House 2, which has nothing to do with House, or like that's why again I give props up. I know it sounds weird, but I give props up to the Saw guys. I mean, they kept, you know, obviously they were doing it for the money. Until the movie stopped making money, they're going to keep making more. But bringing the characters back and then trying to, you know, keep us guessing what's going on. I give them credit. And, I mean, who am I kidding? In the 80s, when I was a kid, what was my #1 movie franchise of all time? Friday the 13th. The more the merrier. Bring them on, you know? Except for Part 5, where it wasn't even Jason. That was a kick in the balls back then. Oh, yeah, Friday the 13th, Part 5. Ooh, totally misleading. You know, I was just playing the final chapter here earlier? Well, the Corey Feldman character in Part 5, he's grown up now, he's a teenager, and he goes to a mental...
Oh, the kid.
Yeah. He goes to a loony bin because he keeps seeing Jason. And then the killings start happening in this institution, and you know, it's a dude dressed as, you assume it's Jason, he's back, and then at the end it turns out it was just some random ambulance driver whose kid was killed at this nut house by another inmate or another kid, so he decides to use the Jason mode to get his revenge and kill all the kids that way. And people were quite pissed off in 1985 when that movie came out.
Would have been kind of cool if it was him.
Yeah, well, and that's what they were hinting at. Could it be Tommy Jarvis, you know, because he was really playing up the nutsy kind of vibe, right? So, hey, brother. Yeah. So.
Okay. What about games? Do you play any horror themed games?
You know, I really don't. Mainly, to be totally honest with you, I just don't have time. Well, are we talking like video games, maybe?
Yeah. Video
games,
I mean, or tabletop or anything.
Oh yeah, well, not so much anymore, but like in the late '90s when I was younger and lived with a lot of pot smoking roommates. I mean. You know, I mean, when PlayStation 1 first came out, like Resident Evil and like all those games were hitting Silent Hill. I mean, yeah, those are badass for sure. Not so. I mean, I kind of get a kick out of some of the zombie games that came out, Left 4 Dead and Dead Island and all that jazz. Although once again, I'm getting kind of bored of zombies. I don't know about you, man, but I just
a little bit.
Yeah, a little bit. Actually, I tried the Saw game. That was interesting. It wasn't great, but. You know, like, oh, they made a video game out of Saw? I got to give it a chance. At least check out the demo.
What do you think of the movies they made based off
of? Movies based off video games?
Yeah, like
okay,
the Silent Hill movie, Resident Evil.
Resident Evil, I remember we saw the advanced screening, the Part 1, was that 10 years ago now? Like, that's getting close. Yeah, 10 or 11 years ago. We were totally disappointed when at that screening, because we're like, this isn't the game, and, you know, like, there wasn't enough zombie action for us. Well, the funny thing is, as the sequels started coming out and they progressively got worse and worse, I can now look at Resident Evil 1 and go, it's not that bad, actually. Yeah, you know, like I didn't like it. I like it more now than I did 11 years ago. Not so much the sequels, though. I mean, Paul Anderson, the director, I mean, I understand his woman is Mila, and,
Yeah.
you know, he wants to look great. The best thing Anderson did was Event Horizon, which wasn't perfect. It basically was The Shining meets Hellraiser in space, but, you know, it was entertaining, and I like Sam Neill. And he also made Mortal Kombat, the first one, so, you know, I gotta give him props for that, even as cheesy by today's standards. Silent Hill I thought was decent, the first one. The new one, yikes.
I have my own things about Revelations.
Yeah. I mean, the thing is, your expectations are automatically lower. But like, this movie is based off a video game. Okay. Not expecting too much, you know?
Yeah.
So.
They're entirely different mediums, and it's kind of weird how they keep trying to translate one over to the other when it's just not going to be the same.
But in the end, it's kind of sad. Where, like, you know, we always make a joke. Some video game storylines are way more complex and richer and more character developed than movies are these days. You know? It's kind of like when we compare movies like, you know, like there's one label I trust is anything on HBO, I'll give it a chance.
Yeah.
You know, HBO is almost better than the movies.
Yeah.
Because they don't have to squeeze it all into it, you know, 2.5 hours, right? So, yeah.
So tell me a little bit about Dead Fest. What do you guys do
Fest,
there?
yeah, it's a film festival. Hang on a second.
Read it as a metaphor, either for individuality. Here's the
Just a mother pick up her kid. Okay, sorry. Is it still going?
Yeah, it's
Oh, okay. Yeah, Dead Fest. Well, I opened the store in 05, and then I met a regular here, and the original owner of my store, or this location, was a friend of mine named Chris Pavoda, and the store was called Oddity Cinema. He only had it for 11 months, and he had moved to the East Coast, so he was going to close it up. I've been working in bars my whole life. I still do to keep this place open, but I love movies, so I said, yeah, I'll take a chance. I'll, you know, take over, switch the name. And I literally started off with like 200 movies in here and just built it up from there. But through the store, I met a couple of cats, and Chris attempted to do a film festival in Edmonton called Return to Odd in 2004. He lost about $10,000. Like, he went with heavy-hitting movies for 04. I mean, the most mainstream movie he showed was Evil Dead, and then after that it was like Cannibal Holocaust, August Underground, Dying Fetus. I mean, there were some, you know, even the most hardened horror fans were like, woo, you know, like, so... through a then regular of mine, Matt Acosta, he's like, well, why don't we try to do like a one-day horror movie marathon, and let's see if it does okay. So spring of 2007, we actually originally called it Return to Odd Part 2 to pay tribute to Chris and what he tried to do. We did a one-day thing, and we ironically showed Evil Dead 2, and then Ichi the Killer, and a couple other movies. And it went pretty well. People were into it. You know, I think it was like $20, and you got to sit in the theater for 8 hours and watch movies. So then my now Dead Fest partner Derek Clayton got involved, and in 2008 we changed name to Deadmonton, and that was our first 3-day film festival, and we actually had the North American premiere of My Name is Bruce. That was our highlight that year at the film fest by one day, because it debuted in Texas the next day with Bruce Campbell in attendance, so they still got the better end of the deal, but whatever. And we showed stuff like Tokyo Gore Police, and then we liked throwing the retro stuff in there, so we had a print of the original Phantasm we threw in there. So that was a 3-day event, and yeah, for the most part, that went pretty good. Then Matt left, so it was just me and Derek, and we had to switch the name again. So then we finally went with Dead Fest 2009, and that was our 3-day event in October. Went really good. I think some of our titles that year were like Lesbian Vampire Killers, I Sell the Dead, Dead Snow was our closing movie, I'll never forget that. We actually showed a Uwe Boll movie that didn't suck, Rampage, which was good. And yeah, so that was a lot of fun. And then it was after that year festival, they gave us the option to show a monthly screening every month to kind of be able to show the old school movies a bit more. So, you know, which was awesome. You know, and over the years we've done like Riccio and The Shining, and like, you know, people that maybe weren't born or were too young to see these in the theaters. Even I was. So it was just cool, and people really went to that. And it's just been building ever since. And now that we're at the Garneau Theater here on the south side, originally we were downtown in the Citadel building, which fit about 200 people. Now we're at the Garneau Theater here, just off White, which fits 500 people, I guess. Now we can afford, hopefully because there is a capacity, to bring in guests, you know, which we started to do last year. You know, brought in Michael Biehn from Terminator and Aliens to show his new movie. We brought in Danielle Harris from Rob Zombie's Halloween and Halloween 4 and 5 to present her new movie. The Astron 6 cast that made Father's Day in Manborg, they came in a couple times. Tim Sullivan, like I was mentioning, to show Chillerama. And you know, now me and Derek have been lucky enough to hit other film festivals, the really big ones like Fantasia Fest in Montreal, and meet the other film festival programmers to kind of help put Dead Fest in Edmonton on the map. And went for the first time last summer, and it went great. I mean, the movies we were able to book last year was directly from going to Montreal's film festival and sitting down with these cats, going to see the movies they were showing. And honestly, you can get so much more business done over a beer at a pub with these guys than through emails back and forth the other side of the country. So it was really cool. And yeah, Dead Fest basically only came to be because of the store. And I think my store, to be honest, is only doing enough business to keep me going because of Dead Fest. So it's kind of been very reciprocal, yeah. I mean, plus, like to meet ends meet. I still work at a bar at night on White Ave, and you know, whenever I DJ, you know, I'll throw some of the titles in from my shop on the screens. You know, people are like, "Oh, what's that?" You know, I've never seen this. Oh, go talk to the DJ. You know, hey, come check out my store. It's 3 blocks that way. You know, so yeah, I live a very sociable lifestyle. You know,
cross promotion.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, from the people I meet through the festival, people meet through my store, people meet through the bar. It's never really a dull moment. So yeah, it's interesting.
Screenings seem to be a pretty big staple of like cult stuff. Why do you think screenings are so important?
I think well, you know, especially when we show the old stuff, I think I mean, everybody that comes to these screenings, you know, they own this movie 3 times over at home on their shelf. They could sit in their couch and watch it, you know, their 60-inch flat screen, digital surround sound system. But I still think when it comes to horror movies and genre movies, it's cool to have a social gathering. With Dead Fest, it's the one festival where I tell people, I'm like, if you don't have anybody to come with, don't worry, come by yourself. Trust me. You hang out in the lobby for 5 minutes, grab a drink or two, you'll meet people that are into the same thing you are. You know, it's not like going to see a regular movie. It's the same. I mean, I can't relate myself, but the same people that go see the Rocky Horror Picture Show every year. I'm not really a fan of the Rocky Horror Picture Show, but I get the community vibe that people get into it by going to it. And again, it's like, I think once video stores and music stores are gone, the people that will remember them are going to reminisce and miss the days of like, I feel like walking to the store and browsing through the shelves. Even though it's more convenient to get everything at home, like you don't have to go out to the movies. We're still humans. We want to socialize, interact. You know, look forward to something to do after a week of work. Maybe not stay home and just watch it on your TV.
In some ways, it's kind of nice not to have all of your options curated by something like Netflix or.
I think so. Yeah.
Like if I browse through the store, I can see I don't know how many hundreds and hundreds of different movies.
Yeah.
Also, yeah. No worries.
Sorry, man. So, can you believe a convoy collection and
Alright, okay. So there are a lot of different things that scare people. Why is it that you think that horror movies actually affect people personally?
It's all opinion, I suppose.
Well, that's why I'm talking to you.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, everything I'm talking about, yeah, it's just, I don't know, the way I see it, I guess, or I don't know. I mean, it's hard to same. You know, it's the cheesiest old adage of like, you know, people like horror movies, or especially as kids, you know, for the rush, for the sensation. You know, they want to get scared, they want to get creeped out. Same reason I guess you go on a roller coaster or something like that, right? But then why do you go on a roller coaster? Sorry about that.
No worries.
I don't know. It's kind of a tough question to articulate. I mean, I know why I like horror. Actually, you know, at times I can't explain why I like horror movies, I guess. You know, it's just something that's inbred into me as a kid. You know, same reason the music that you like, or you know, the clothing you like to wear. I mean, everybody's different and unique that way, I suppose. I don't know. To me, horror movies, you know, obviously the original answer is it's escape from your mundane, original, day-to-day life, right? There's a fantasy element into it. It's the same reason people like sci-fi. Same reason people go, you know, that's why I like, you know, Comic-Cons are just so big. I mean, the Calgary one just happened, and, you know, people like to get away from their regular life, and you know, movies, and especially fantasy, horror, sci-fi, they're a great way to do it, I suppose. You know.
Actually, I just watched The Exorcist, and I've heard from a lot of people that it's a really, really scary movie, and it didn't really touch me at all. And I was wondering if you could figure out, like, from a historical perspective, why people were scared of The Exorcist.
I think, you know, I mean, it was a little bit before my time. I wasn't born when it came out, but you have to remember, the movie came out, I believe, in 1974, and God bless the marketers, they released it on Christmas Day, which was, and what I tell the younger generation is, you didn't find it scary, or, you know, it didn't affect you. All I tell them is, okay, picture the year it was made, pretend you're the age you are now in that era, know what was out at that time. Right. We're so desensitized now to a certain degree that a movie from 20 or 30 or 40 years ago next year, The Exorcist, you know, generally won't hit you as hard. Now, for me, with that movie in particular, I'm not a religious guy. But if you were a stout, Catholic, hardcore believer, and you saw The Exorcist, especially back then, you'd be flipping out. Because, you know, you get out of The Exorcist what you bring into it. If you believe in God and you believe in the devil, whether or not you personally found the movie like scary, since The Exorcist, I can't think of another possession / demonic that type of movie that's come out that has beaten The Exorcist. Because every movie that's come out since then wants to pay enough tribute to The Exorcist because it worked out so well as a story. It's like great acting, and it was a beautiful production. Was it scary to me myself? No. I mean, I'm with you, right? I will admit though, if for a movie that's 39 years old now, I don't care how desensitized we are. That scene where you have a 12-year-old girl masturbating with a crucifix saying "fuck me, Jesus," and the blood. That's still shocking today.
Yeah.
You know, you do that today, you'd be like, oh, geez, damn, that's
Tone it back.
up. Yeah. And also, I don't know, you know, if you've seen documentaries in the making of the movie or the hell that went through making that movie, no pun intended. You know, the story itself is fascinating. It struck lightning in a bottle at a time, I guess, that people were, you know, I mean, there were people passing out. I guess business in confessions in church went up quite a bit that year. People, you know, were like, you know, they'd walk out of the theater, I guess, convinced, oh my God, the devil's out there, and I feel like I've been possessed by watching this movie. So, it's a product of its time, I guess. You know, I'm with you. I still enjoy seeing it. The Garneau showed it last year. I went to see it in the theater because it was cool to see in the theater. I saw it in '99 when they reissued it with the extra footage, the spider walk and all that jazz.
That was cool.
Yeah, I'm with you. But that's, remember what I said earlier, where like when it comes to horror movies, I want to be entertained, or a movie that resonates with me, and if it scares me, even better. But The Exorcist still entertains me. I still think it's a solid movie. It's well acted, well put together. So on that note, I can always recommend it, especially if you watch The Exorcist 2, which we'll never talk about. That was still one of the worst sequels of all time. But yeah, I see what you're saying. You know, I just don't think when it comes to demonic possession movies, which personally for me, again, because of my beliefs, I'm not really that freaked out by them, even the new ones. Like, it just doesn't do much for me. But nobody, to me, has beaten The Exorcist when it comes to telling that storyline. And anybody that tries to beat it, if they come close, it's because they're borrowing so much from the original movie that it's looked upon as, well, you're just ripping off The Exorcist now, you know. And then they try to do their own thing too much, it's just like, you're no Exorcist. You know, so it's a lose-lose scenario. You notice out of all the classic horror movies in the last 40 years, everyone has been remade except for The Exorcist. They have not remade it yet. Now you watch it, by the time, you know, this comes out, it'll be announced this week. We're in post-pre-production for The Exorcist. Damn you, Warner Brothers. But, yeah. But, you know, but on that note, you know, The Exorcist never affect you, and me, I guess, as well, but, like, you know, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre came out the same year as The Exorcist did, and that movie did affect me, and you know, still does to a certain degree.
Yeah.
It's just so dirty, that movie, you know, there's just something grimy about it. I feel like you need a shower after you watch it.
Okay, actors. You mentioned like really good acting. How do you think that the reactions of the actors on screen affect how the audience experiences the movie?
Well, a lot actually, and it's funny because I can kind of go on another point. We were just talking about this yesterday. For me, the heyday of horror movies will always be the '80s because that's my generation when I was a kid and I was absorbing most of them. But it was also definitely the heyday and the best era for practical special effects, creature features, monsters being made, and we were talking because it was so much easier for the actors to react to this stuff because they were seeing it in front of them. Now everything's CGI, you know, and it's just, it doesn't have the same texture to it, you know? I mean, you know they're getting lazy when, well, you could put a squib on the guy and actually have texturized blood explode out of his chest. Nah, we'll just post-production and CGI. CGI blood still has not been mastered, by the way. You could still tell it's CGI, not on the set blood, right? But yeah, I mean, you know, people think of horror movies, again, that, oh, just hire a bunch of, like, you know, half-ass B teenage good-looking actors, and that's your typical horror movie actor. And yes and no. I mean, you know, again, look at some of the best horror movies. You mentioned The Fly. Jeff Goldblum, great actor, you know. The Thing, great ensemble cast. Kurt Russell, totally the man. Awesome. You know, the movie that friggin' won Best Oscar, Nut Dunny, Anthony Hopkins, Jodie Foster, great cast. It does help if you have some powerhouse, decent actors in a horror movie. And, you know, it was weird in the 80s. Nobody wanted to do horror movies. It was embarrassing. You know, like, that's not good for my career. You know, I can't do it. And then, again, a movie like Scream comes along, and then it became the cool niche thing where, well, we'll get, because, you know, Drew Barrymore's in it. Whoa, she gets killed 5 minutes in. And, you know, after that, every up-and-coming hot, quote-unquote, actor, where are they going to get a start from? Horror movies, right? Kevin Bacon, Friday the 13th. Johnny Depp, Nightmare on Elm Street.
Kevin Bacon started in Friday the 13th.
Viggo Mortensen, Prison and Leatherface, Texas Chainsaw Massacre 3. Renee Zellweger and Matthew McConaughey, Texas Chainsaw Massacre 4. You know, Lawrence Fishburne, Nightmare on Elm Street 3. Patricia Arquette, Nightmare on Elm Street 3.
That was a good flick for people.
Yeah, that was a good flick for people.
Well, what do you think can ruin like a specific scene in a movie where, you know, they're building up to a scare? What do you think could really ruin that? Is like overexposure of a creature, false scares?
Overexposure of the creature, but I was going to go with column B there. Jump scares. I hate jump scares. I think they're the biggest cop out. Like, the only jump scares that I will traditionally love are, again, the ones they save for at the very end of the movie when you think it's over, like Carrie. You know, after all the, and speaking of remakes, Friday the 13th, the original, you know, I mean, because it was Jason's mom was a killer in the first one, you know, our survivor, she's in the canoe, they got the beautiful, tranquil music going on, she's floating in the lake, and, you know, kid, mutated Jason comes flying up, pulls her under. Whether it was a dream or not, doesn't matter. Well, we all know what, well, sort of was a dream, but then Jason did come back in part 2. Those are the cool scares. Yeah, I'm not a big fan of, like, oh, cat jumped out of the window, and especially with a lot of these newer movies where it's just jump scare, jump scare, jump scare, because it's good and effective the first time you watch it in a theater, and if you're on a date, good on you, man. I mean, there's some good tighting holding going on because of that, but where's the repeat viewing in it? Once you know where all the jump scares are, I'm a big fan of like building up the ambiance, the creepiness, you know. But again, I think I was talking about this earlier, I find that today's generation, or not even generation, today's studio heads that think they know what today's generation wants are like, forget building a good ambiance, foreshadowing, backstory. Let's just get to the scares. Every 5 minutes, boom, something's got to happen, you know? Where, and that's why I kind of feel bad, because I love recommending the older traditional movies to younger generation. And when I'm saying older, I don't mean like 40s and 50s. Oh, those are great too. But for me, older is like, you know, try the 70s, early 80s. And I always, you know, give them the heads up, like, listen, it's kind of a slow burner to start, but give it, you know, a good 40, 45 minutes, and I promise you it'll pay off because you're actually invested in the story, you're invested in what's going on with these characters, so when then the bad shit starts happening, you actually care, rather than, you know, all hell breaking loose 5 minutes in, and then it's just repeat, recycle for the next hour and a half. Again, I could be totally talking on my ass here, but it's just my opinion.
Yeah, well, that's why I'm talking to you.
Hey, rock and roll.
What do you think? There's sex in almost every single horror movie.
God
what do you
bless
think
it.
that's about?
That's about money and hitting your demographic. Let's be honest, especially in the 80s, sex sells. I mean, it's the oldest cliche. Whether, you know, there will always be horror movie fans of all ages and genders, of course. And actually, the female horror movie fans become bigger than the male horror movie fan these days. But in the end, the number one demographic for every studio guy, you know, 18 to 25-year-old males. What do 18 to 25-year-old males want to see? Nudity, sex. So, got to give it to them.
Do you think it adds anything to the horror?
In my childhood, it totally did. And even in my teenage years, it totally did. But
For the most part, I suppose not. I mean, it still serves a purpose. It's almost like cliche 101, you know, like you gotta have this in there because, you know, people expect it. It depends what kind of horror you're making though. If we're talking about a slasher movie where a bunch of teens are going to, you know, to have a good time, yes. Because right there, you're not expecting like Oscar caliber acting skills, right? Yeah. You have your rules. You want kind of like your levity or your fart and dick jokes. You want your TNA, and then when it goes bad, it goes really bad, you know. Besides, there were the classic 80s rules that have been mocked and parodied in the 90s so much. You know, if you have sex, you're going to die. You do drugs, you're going to die. It is what it is. You got to have the sheriff that knows nothing about nothing. And you got to have the creepy old guy that can tell you all about what happened in the town 40 years ago, but nobody ever listens to that dude.
Because he's been saying it for 40 years.
Exactly. Warning him, you're all doomed. Just get out, you know? And I'm just like, I love it, though. I love it. I love that cheesiness, which is funny now because it's cheesy now, but when those, you know, when we saw that first movie back in the day with that first creepy old guy doing the warning and telling them that the legend of, whether it's the legend of, you know, Harry Warden and My Bloody Valentine or the legend of Jason Voorhees, that was actually scary. We wanted to listen to that old guy. Like, yeah, now it's just hilarious. You pray for that old guy to show up to give us the traditional creepy, cheesy 80s warning, which I still love. I'm such a sucker for that. Yeah. So yeah, sex does serve a purpose as far as you just need it. But again, that's those kind of movies. You know, I mean, if you have something like John Carpenter's masterpiece, The Thing, where it's an all-male cast of the Arctic, that movie's totally built on suspense. You don't need no female characters in there because it just, hey, it's totally out of place, you know? It isn't necessary.
It certainly makes people pay attention.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
What about hosts? Like, traditionally there have been a lot of horror movie hosts. Like, there was Alfred Hitchcock and, I'm totally gonna not remember anyone. But yeah, like, horror movie hosts have always been a thing. Do you think they add anything to horror?
You mean the houses? Like the structure of, like...
No, like Alfred Hitchcock. Hosts.
Oh, host. I said house.
Oh, no.
Oh, okay.
No, I gotta speak louder.
Yeah, no. Yeah, well, you know, that I love what Hitchcock did back there. He introduced, you know, his movies. He'd always have a cameo in his movies. Yeah. Kind of like Stephen King will always kind of show up. Blink and you'll miss him in any Stephen King adapted movie. Most of them, anyways.
Like Stan Lee does. Yeah,
like Stan Lee in the Marvel movies, right? I don't know. I think there was more. What's the word they always use? To promote their movies back in the 50s, 60s, it was almost like circus showmanship. Like you're like a ballyhoo, I think the word was. You know, you're like a ringleader. Like Hitchcock, you know, would always, instead of showing you a proper movie trailer of the movie, be him kind of talking about his movie and walking you through the sets, and then this happened here and that. And he had a cheeky way of doing it, which was pretty cool. And then, you know, you had guys that weren't as prestigious as Hitchcock, like William Castle. He was the guy that came up with all the gimmicks, the buzzers and the seats. And, you know, there'd be a dude in the theater dressed up as the creature you're seeing, and they'd invent some new, you know, filmed in Terror Vision or whatever. And, you know, and they were theatrics. They were necessary back then. It's good marketing. It's how you promote your movie. Obviously now, in today's age, they still do great marketing. It's just instead of doing that, they'll do stuff like, you know, I mean, it's all about the movie trailer now, and you know, internet promotions and websites, and like, you know, and it just seems that that kind of innocent charm is missing these days. Because again, you can't help but be cynical and go, this is a studio corporation-driven industry now. It's not led by creativity. It's led by, let's fill our seats with asses and make as much money as possible. That's why we're seeing Paranormal Activity 5 coming out this year. You know.
Those seat buzzer things kind of remind me of like 3D in movies.
Absolutely, yeah. Well, yeah, and yeah, remember 3D's had, I think, 3 kind of golden eras. The first 3D era was in the 50s, and then 3D came back strong in the early 80s with like Jaws 3D and Friday the 13th Part 3D and Amityville 3D. And then, yes, you're right, 3D came back obviously in the last 4 or 5 years. But now you can't help, like, 3D in horror movies served a purpose. That's where 3D should be used, you know? Like, I want to see the blood and stuff come flying out if it's done right. But man, like, how sick of you were 3D? If I was doing an ad camp, that's why with Deadfest, we were very proud to always announce, like, Deadfest 2013, all movies shown in 2D. You know, we're proud of that, because I swear to God, I'm sick of 3D. Like, if I have to choose, I'm like, I do not want to give you my extra $3, you know? To me, it's like the trailers look 3D, but once the movie starts, I'm like, it's a little bit dimmer than I think it should be. and 10 minutes they don't even notice the 3D anymore.
There's only about 2 movies I think I've ever seen that use the 3D really well.
And
First half of Silent Hill Revelations, when she's looking in the door and you can see through the window, and they use the 3D to give it a little bit of depth.
fair enough. I cannot relate. I did not pay to see that in the theater.
Okay.
But, yeah.
And just with the Avengers, when they were using it to give depth to the cityscape, I think
Yeah.
they do backgrounds very well.
The
with
background
3D.
depth is great, and that's what I do dig on 3D. The last movie I saw did a great job with 3D. Actually, the last 2. This is a 3-year gap. Surprisingly, Jackass 3D, awesome 3D. But more recently, Dredd, the remake of Judge Dredd, fantastic 3D use because, I don't know if have you seen the movie?
No, not yet.
Great movie, you need to check it out. Too bad it bombed. Nobody supported it, very upsetting. It was a hard rated R movie. Basically, there's a drug in the movie that if you smoke it, your whole world slows down like a millisecond.
Yeah.
So visually, it's all like slow motion. So that's where the 3D like just totally kicked ass.
Sweet.
Yeah, really, really good. But yeah, I mean, for the most part, it's just like enough's enough, you know.
Yeah.
Like I don't know, maybe I'm sick. I'm like I don't want to give you more money than, and like a lot of the times you don't even have the choice. Is it playing in 2D? No. Oh, okay.
I guess I'll go see
get
it.
the glasses.
Yeah. What do you think? Like endings. We're almost finished here. What do you think about like endings? Should they be happy? Should there be like a good resolution or like?
Okay, when it comes to horror movies, this isn't an exact quote, but I'll steal the words from one of my favorite directors, George Romero. Romero, especially with Night of the Living Dead, Dawn of the Dead, Day of the Dead, they were not happy endings. They were like pretty dark, and his whole theory was, you know, you're making this fake world where if you're making horror, you're taking society, which is, let's say, an apple cart, and you're flipping it upside down. You're spilling it all over the place. What's the point of doing that if by the end of the movie you're just going to place all the apples back into place and it's like it never happened? You're trying to make a movie that, well, his movies were trying to make a statement and other stuff too. I mean, I'm not saying Friday the 13th is making a statement on anything. It's just trying to say, hey, that Halloween movie in '78 did pretty good. Let's do the exact same thing. We need to rip it off and make money. It just spawned life of its own. It's basically what it is. I mean, Friday the 13th was a rip off of Halloween, but I still love it. What can I say? Yeah, I think you should. I like endings that leave you uncomfortable when you're leaving the theater. You know, as long as it doesn't feel like cheesy and like tagged on, like oh yeah, you know, like that didn't flow with the rest of the story at all. If it feels forced, then no. But on the same note, if a happy ending feels forced, they're like, oh really, dude? Like I'm pretty sure you got like chopped up and shot 8 times and you're not dead. Come on, man. You know. No, I'm all about. When I was a kid, obviously I loved the happy ending because I'm a kid. I don't want to have freaky nightmares, knowing that the killer's still out there. I want to make sure everything was good. Killer's dead. Everything's great. Or the monster's dead. But as I got older, I'm like, what can I say? I want people to remember the movie, I guess.
And speaking of monsters dying, when do you think they should ever just end? Like, do you think series should end? Like, the Jason one went on forever. Freddy went on for a long time.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, like, in a perfect world, honestly, I'd probably say Friday the 13th should have stopped at part 4 instead of where it is now. But the problem is, though, I'm a horror movie fan, right? And all horror movie fans, we're all guilty of this. We support the genre so much that every time a new movie comes out, we're probably like, this is going to be so terrible. We all know it's going to suck ahead of time. Hey, are you going to go see it opening night? Oh, I got to see it, obviously. What I beg my friends is, like, look, man, I understand. It's like a drug to us. We need to see it, but you're setting yourself up for heavy disappointment. So just do me a solid. Just pay for another movie so this doesn't get your money. So that way, when it does suck, which it usually always does, they don't go, hey, but look how much money we made, so let's make another one. So yeah, I think there is a time and a place, like say, enough is enough, I'm pretty sure this will be the last year for Paranormal Activity movies because I think the last one made money, but not nearly as much as the first 3. Obviously Saw set new one to end, and they were actually going to go with 8 Saws. I don't know if you saw the last Saw the final chapter. Basically, they had a script for part 7 and part 8, but when the studio was like, look guys, we can only give you one more movie. It's just not that profitable anymore. They squished the 2 plots together. It felt a little bit rushed, but at least they got a chance to bookend it. They got a
Tell the
chance to
story
wrap
at
it
the
up.
end.
Yeah, there definitely are a few. I mean, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre series is a complete and utter mess. They're not even connected. Halloween, the same thing. It's just, yeah, sometimes just good and let it be.